We sometimes are all amazed and impressed at the idea of going out into space. And again, I just got back a week or so ago from watching our latest mission to Jupiter. When you hang out around these people, you realize it's like, oh, geez, I have to get up early. I got to send a mission to Mars. Yeah. It means I can't stay for last call. And this is the mindset there. This is a crazy world. Of course you're going to be going to Mars tomorrow. And everyone has to, forget about last call. Well, we're also very nicely amazed that this stuff works. It is impossible to describe how really tough this is. And sometimes very tough things don't work out so well. This is a case study. This is going to go down in history as one of those bad examples in technology and spaceflight. This is the Boeing Starliner. We're going to go through a little bit of the history and then a bunch of the things that went wrong. And then we'll talk at the end about why it went wrong. Let's just say if you're a Boeing shareholder, sell. Well, no, you'd be selling really low. Anyway. I'm sorry, can you hear?
I sold when I retired from it.
Oh, okay. And when you retired, it was again, Boeing has gone through difficult times. This is not going to be a Boeing bashing. I don't like doing that. That's not fair to Boeing. And, although, yes and no. I'm not going to go into the hardcore, well, it's because of McDonnell-Douglas merger of 30 years. No, people beat up on that. We could talk all day. We probably might afterwards. But I don't want to make that the whole point. There were tough times, and you go, oh, well, SpaceX is doing great. They were neck and neck for a while until they weren't. So, just for the new folk here, I'm a NASA Solar System ambassador. Got great business cards. It's a great gig. I've been doing it about a dozen years. There's about 1,200 of us all over the country. We walk amongst you. We might even be going out with your daughters or your sons, or both, who knows. But our whole mission is to spread the NASA gospel to communities. The idea is you're not going to get an astronaut for your grandkid's birthday. Sorry. I know it's a bummer. The kids are, crying themselves to sleep, but that's the reality. But people are still interested. What was the last time you had a seminar and everyone was excited about seeing someone from the Office of Management and Budget? Not real likely. Kids love this stuff. Parents love this stuff. And your tax dollars, you're spending, a little bit. It's only about 0.5% of the federal budget for NASA. But, you want to see where your money's going. And we do amazing things with that little bit of money. Except for us. Except for the two gals back at JPL, which is where we do all the planetary missions, where they built the Europa mission. No tax dollars are spent. None. 2 or 3 folk doing the administration, that's fine. I am forbidden by federal law to accept any kind of compensation for this. This is all done out of our own good hearts. There's a bunch of folk in New Jersey. If you know of any community organization, library, senior center, I do 3 or 4 of these lectures a month. And each one can be customized. I can talk about almost anything that NASA's doing. So my cards are around here somewhere. If you want to get in touch, my email's on it. And we can talk about doing something. So anyway, this is a bad day at work kind of a story. And there's also great learnings out of this for the next time round. Have this Starliner. Of course, you hear about the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. I hate calling them capsules. They were pretty much neck and neck, but why all of a sudden did we decide to do this? And it was this. You go, what the heck's that? That's what's left of Columbia. That's the space shuttle. 2003, that was almost 20 years ago, or was 20 years ago. Lost a lot of good people. The key thing was, this was our access to the space station. It's how we constructed it. It's how we rotated the crews every 6 months, etc. And just like Challenger, the shuttle was down for a couple of years while it was, the problems were being figured out. NASA smacked their collective forehead and went, we need assured access to space. And the way the military's been doing it and the government lately is, okay, we're not going to put all our eggs in one basket like the shuttle was. We want two dissimilar ways of doing things. Because if we don't, what happens when that one breaks? Yeah, it's going to cost more. But here is a national imperative to have assured access to a resource that the world has spent roughly $140, $150 billion on. Be ashamed to spend all that money and not be able to get a ride up there. So, we decided after this accident, we're going to end the shuttle. Just cut it off. We're going to finish the space station. We have international treaty level obligations to do that. Also rotate the crews. But we got to stop flying the shuttle. And we did about 13 years ago, 14 years ago. What do you do next? Well, how do you get them up? That was the last shuttle flight. Sent up some supplies, did some last bits of construction, and that was it. The next stop for all the shuttles were museums. And you can go see them, and they're very impressive. Interesting that they're about 40 years old when you think of it. We were able to do all that with that kind of technology. This was our ride to space. Russian Soyuz. Big running joke in the astronaut corps when the shuttle ended was, if you don't speak Russian, you got to find another business to be in. Because now we're doing business with Russia. And I don't have to tell you, being in business or bedfellows with the Russians is difficult nowadays. However, and this is an aside, this is from a talk a couple months ago, the cooperation in space, we can talk about Ukraine, I'd rather not talk about Ukraine, we can talk about human rights, etc., etc., etc. The space station program, as far as international cooperation, is such an incredible achievement. In 2014, the ISS program was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. And it still works that well. But now, we're shoveling lots of money to Russia. Russia may have started as a communist country, but by God, they learned capitalism. As soon as we became dependent on them, the price of a ride went up 4 times. Close to $100 million a seat now. Certainly doesn't cost them anywhere near that, but Russians aren't dumb. So we ended up shuttling back and forth for about a dozen years, about 10 years, on the Soyuz. It's a rock-solid spacecraft. On the whole, it doesn't break. They've been flying it for 40 years. It is a miserable, cramped, archaic system, but like so many other Russian things, yeah, you can fix it with a ball-peen hammer and a paper clip. These things are built like tanks. We won't talk about Ukraine and what happened to Russian tanks. Anyway, so we're stuck on the Soyuz. We need our own assured ride to space, and so NASA sent out a contract. Who wants to bid on building the next generation space taxi? We call it Commercial Crew. Oh, there's a caveat. This is not going to be a regular government contract. You bid your price. That's the price the government and the taxpayers will pay. If you have troubles, it's on your own dime. They call it a firm fixed price. No negotiating, no wiggle room, no cost overruns. This was going to be the new way government wants to do business. We hear how many stories in just about every high technology project. Oh, we thought it was tougher, we need more money. No, that's not going to happen. This is all on their own dime after they get it. And it's all milestone based. They don't get a lump sum up front. New way of doing business at NASA. And the government in general, military and all the rest are starting to go down this route. So we have Boeing's entry. A bunch of people competed. Boeing and SpaceX won. These are their spacecraft. Not relative size, actually. Starliner is a touch bigger. But yeah, And like every other government project, it was years late, both of them. But the government really was riding SpaceX hard because they'd never really done anything like this. It turns out they really had. Boeing, I mean, they were the ones that put men on the moon, built the X-15, the shuttle, they managed the space station. Fine, we trust you. That turned out to be a somewhat bad move. They did, roughly the same time, a few months separated. Another key milestone, you have to test to see if you can get the crew away in terms of when there's a problem. These are abort tests, Dragon and Starliner. This is where problems started happening. Okay, SpaceX, they actually had a few problems here, but on the whole it went fine. Starliner, on the whole, had a few problems, and it went fine, but there was, again, the thing with bad problems is lots of them are very visible. All right, there it is, coming down, 2 parachutes, looks good. There's supposed to be 3. A basic parachute rigging error, it's all generically called rigging. They forgot to connect one of the parachutes. Oops. And when you look at the video, you just see one of them flying away and 2 of them pop out perfectly fine. That was an unforced error. And in the reports you just see, oh, well, there's supposed to be a pin here holding things, and where's the pin? Okay, but they knew what it was. There's thousands of procedures now. They're not going to miss the pin. So anyway, they finally start launching. SpaceX was first. They did some really good stuff. Things worked generally quite well. Boeing fired off their first. This is where things got bad. Really bad. Unforced errors, stupid shit, stuff. There's a clock on the spacecraft. Keeps track of all the milestones it has to do. There's a clock in the rocket, there's a clock on the ground. I mean, everything is timed with lots of things. The clock on the spacecraft was out of sync by only about 13 hours. Unforced error. Never revealed in testing because they never tested that. So now it's in orbit. The rocket, Atlas rockets, United Launch Alliance, is wonderful. If you want the most precise, not the cheapest, most precise launches to anywhere, call ULA. It was perfectly done. Once their job was done, that's when the problems start. So now, the capsule's confused. Spacecraft's confused. It starts hunting around and firing its thrusters and trying to catch up with the space station. Only thing is, it's trying to do 2 things at once when it really shouldn't be doing anything at all. Basically, it was out of control. Burned up all of its fuel, most of it. The folks on the ground went no and stopped it. But that's bad. That's really bad. All because they couldn't get their clocks synced up. And they had all kinds of communications problems. Turns out the timing and a few other things, it really was a technical problem. They were looking in all the wrong places. Okay, fine. But on the way back home, you have that one section that was below here. That's going to feature into a lot of the other problems. It has its job to take the spacecraft out of orbit, and then it goes away. The only thing that's recovered is the capsule, the command module. And right before it's supposed to come home, they cut the flight short. Instead of 5 days going up to the space station and back, they said, we can't get there, we're coming home early. It turns out they had a problem where, in certain situations, instead of nice cleanly separating, it would separate and then come back and smash it. Oops, unforced error. But they figured it out, they put up a patch, everything worked fine, it came home, perfect performance, and all the rest. Oh, and NASA calls these high visibility close calls. Yes, they have a phrase for everything. There's no acronym. It's right before loss of mission in terms of urgency. And so if you say that some knucklehead cut you off, that was a high visibility close call. You made it through, that's not what you want. So anyway, SpaceX launches their first crew. Remember, all these were uncrewed flights. And Bob and Doug, nobody really, everyone knows their last names, but nobody uses them. It's just Bob and Doug, one syllable. And they go up to the space station. One of the really interesting things, that last mission of the shuttle, they know they want to put up crews again someday soon. It's going to be a competition. They left a little American flag in there. And the idea was go capture the flag. Winner takes it home. And here it is. This is just a beauty shot. And they captured the flag. Nice little touch. It's probably an LMS office somewhere. But yeah, they beat the pants out of Boeing. Boeing is struggling now. It took about a year-ish to go through a total software review. They found 61 errors. Now, I spent my entire career in IT. 61 errors in our world is, oh, that's about right. The fact that they found the errors, if you went through everything in all software, yeah, you're going to find that there were major issues, and now they have policies and procedures to keep stupid errors like that from happening. Well, anyway, now it's time for the next test. Remember, Boeing's not getting paid more for any of this. They're being paid by objectives. Their first objective they didn't get paid for. Or maybe only a little bit, but all right, we're going to do a do-over. We're going to fire off another one of these on our own dime. That's $400 million for them by the time they did all that work. And they're all ready to go. They got all the major problems fixed. They got the parachutes connected, the whole smash. They start counting down. And you wonder why you do a countdown. There's a zillion tasks to do ahead of time. And so they started testing everything, make certain everything's right, and they have to open up valves. It's always valves in space flight. They're the most troublesome things. And they had a couple dozen valves they have to open and close. Okay, those work, check, move on. Well, about a dozen of them didn't. All right, well, maybe we're not like the Russians. We don't get out a hammer and start banging it, but yeah, we'll play around with it. We'll delay it a day or two. We'll figure it out. A day or two comes, nothing is working, and they go, okay, we're going to take it down. They don't like doing that at all. Going back to the hangar is a bad day. And they started taking things apart. They found the valves were rusted shut. From what? You can imagine this is mega high-tech aerospace grade everything. They shouldn't be rusted shut. Well, there is some way you can do that. The valves that were being used turned out to control what's called the oxidizer. Like in any fire, you need the fuel like wood or charcoal, and you need oxygen to oxidize it, and you create flames. The oxidizer used universally for the last 50, 70 years is a very nasty chemical called nitrogen tetroxide. Just a couple nitrogens, 4 oxygens, and it is wonderful as an oxidizer. It is nasty, nasty stuff. If any of it leaks, you'll see what's called a BFRC, a big, fill in the blank on the F, red cloud. You take a look at that, assess which way the wind is going, and get some running shoes and go in the other direction. Because nitrogen tetroxide has a nasty habit. When it's near moisture, it absorbs the moisture and converts itself to nitric acid, probably some of the nastiest stuff ever. And that will, the reason why you want to get away from that red cloud, you can imagine what happens if nitric acid gets in your lungs. You don't have to worry about smoking or anything else anymore because you'll be dead quickly. somehow, some way, just the humidity in the air was enough to start that reaction, and it rusted the valve shut. They still don't know why that happened. You know, everything is purged and flooded with nitrogen. I mean, there's lots of steps. They're not dummies. The people that designed all this stuff have been doing it for the better part of a century, working with it. They know this stuff. It's a company called Aerojet Rocket Time. If you need a rocket engine, call up Aerojet. They're the ones. And nobody has had, and they never saw it in any other of the different spacecraft. No idea of the root cause, but they know that just by the evidence of all the rest. This had to have been the way. So what they did was the next spacecraft that was coming off the assembly line, they just swapped this out with the next one. Mission launched well. Really worked pretty well. Honestly, it did. But now there's a small problem. Completely nobody's fault and everyone's fault. The space station only has 2 gates, 2 docking ports. And most of the time they're occupied. And you have a tourist flight, you go to either this one or this docking port, there's no more. We've probably been on an airliner and the guy's taxiing back to the gate and all the rest, and they go, oh, all the gates are full, we have to sit here until the next plane leaves and we can pull up to the gate. That's what's happening. You had to sit and wait for an opportunity, and these flights are planned years in advance. And Boeing just sat on the ground. It wasn't their fault at all. It wasn't NASA's. It wasn't SpaceX. It was just the sequence of events. So they had to stand down. Now it's getting to be about 4 years from their late deadlines. It's now getting close to a decade from when they first got the contracts. But eventually it launches. It actually was a very good flight. Some odd things happened. Thrusters were getting, the little rocket engines that maneuver you, were starting to get really hot. We had to shut down a few of them because they were overheating. But we think we understood why. We saw that in the first mission with this thing flying in all different directions. Overheating was not a surprise just because they're being used and abused. This one was, and so they go and tweak the software, tweak the procedures, and think, okay, we've got this one. Oh, and right before they were supposed to try that launch, okay, so it was a success. 2, not unforced errors, but errors. This is special tape. Remember the Apollo 1 fire? Everything had tons of exposed wiring. As soon as flame hit it, it starts spreading. Bad thing. So now the standard is for some of these important wire bundles, you wrap it in like a fiberglass fireproof tape. Very smart, used everywhere in aerospace. I mean, this is the standard. Well, it turned out the wires they were putting through it, a bunch of them were rated higher current or whatever than what the tape could support. So they had to pull all the tape out. Now this is deep inside the spacecraft. Not that they had to completely disassemble it, but because someone didn't do configuration control. Now we have to take a lot of it apart, pull out all this tape, wrap it again, and all the rest. More delays. And then, and this is not Boeing's problem, but other people and whatever, these are what's called soft links. They're the things that hold the parachutes to your cargo or your spacecraft. It turned out that wasn't spec'd tough enough. And so they had to go through a whole new series of parachute qualifications. But finally, Butch and Sonny, the 2 astronauts, waiting 4 years for their ride, finally get a chance to go. And these are probably some of the best test pilots NASA ever had. Suni has been on the station for 6 months assignments for about a total of almost 2 years. Butch has been up there once or twice, again, 6 months at a crack. Anyone know anyone in the military? A lot of us do. You know, my dad was career fighter pilot. You know, it's like you get your orders. Okay, I'm off for a year to god awful place. That's what it's like with these folk. You kiss your family goodbye. I'll see you next year. This is what's called a doghouse. It doesn't look anything like a doghouse. We have a dog. You know, he has the house. But this is where all those thrusters are kept. This is on the outside. This turns out to be Butch and Sonny's big nemesis. And it looks like a mess. Lots of plumbing, lots of rocket engines. Looks pretty densely packed. That turns into a problem. Here you have 5, 10, 2 on the sides, 12 rocket engines in each one. And understand, we say thrusters and it'll maneuver and all the rest. These things get hot. These things get really hot. I have no idea who's texting what, but... And that's just a little rocket engine. It's only about this big. Heats up to about 2,800 degrees. And when you're firing them, things that are in that close quarters get really hot. Parts that shouldn't get really hot. Nice little test cell like this, okay, everything looks nice, it radiates away the heat. Well, as Butch and Sonny, when they went off, they had lots of test objectives. And they went through all of them as good test pilots, and one of them was, okay, these are not all, they say they're autonomous. No, they're pretty much remotely controlled, but the systems do most. But being good test pilots, they're required to test out its handling qualities just like you would with a new airplane. And Butch is there zipping around, and Suni takes over and she does her thing. And the thrusters, the things that keep your attitude start failing. Software is smart enough to go, we got a problem, they shut them down. There's enough redundancy, they're able to dock, and they were able to get on board all happy, because it's been a 4-year delay in their flight. You can imagine they're kind of, those smiles are not artificial. They're happy to be there because, by God, well, let's get this in, get this out, and I can go home. That wasn't to happen. What they found, now, unlike accidents like Challenger, Columbia, the Russians had a problem and they were able to exploit this idea. Once you're on the space station, you're safe. You're not stranded. I mean, there's always ways to get you home. Even though the Starliner was having its problems, it had enough redundancy built in that they said, okay, if it's a bad day, you can use it to get home. We're confident in that enough. We don't want to, but we're confident. While we figure out all the root causes. Now, these are smart engineers. I mean, people trash various organizations. Oh, they're incompetent. These guys are not. They are all very good. And good engineers like to do a lot of good tests. And they started testing. That thruster picture is part of one of them. And they're going, we don't really like what we see, and we don't understand it. And so what they eventually found out, with all of those rocket engines in close quarters, they start heating up that whole assembly badly. The seals in the valves are actually very, very fancy Teflon. I won't say nothing special like what's in your pans or anything, but it's Teflon. And they were getting deformed and squeezed in crazy ways. And it started inhibiting the flow of the propellants and making the engines unreliable. Once it cooled down, they were kind of okay. And they only think they know this. Sorry, they strongly believe it. But they have no proof because that little piece of the spacecraft goes away. Never gets brought home for them to do post-flight analysis. This happens a lot in spaceflight. So what are you going to do? Big questions. This is where, It is not an engineering decision. This is where management has to make the call. Management made the call for Apollo 1. Management made the call for Columbia, for Challenger. See how well that worked out. After Columbia, there was a whole new mindset at NASA. We are not going to be stupid. We're not going to, oh, it'll be all right. We're going to err so far on the side of caution, we're going to be happy we get off the ground at all. And they spent 2 months looking at this. They wanted to understand the problem because the crew is in a safe spot. The spacecraft is stable. We have time. And after a couple months, a new crew is supposed to come up. There's lots of other constraints. Those docking ports need to be cleared. Says, all right, here's what we're going to do. Butch and Sonny, you're staying. Spacecraft's coming home by itself, empty. We have rides home for you, no problem. And they rigged up something. They were going to get home. They were not stranded. Please understand that. But that was saying goodbye to an old friend. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, depending on your perspective, okay, sorry. They sent it back home. So what are you going to do? Now, instead of a 2-week mission, they're up there for 8 months. And again, throws in the military, you know that's an option you don't like, but that's what you signed up for. And so, yeah, 2 weeks to 8 months. They're coming home in February. Spacecraft to bring them home is already up there. And so they're doing science. They are a fully integrated member of the crew. All of them, or the 2 of them, are just working like, crazy, doing maintenance, doing all the stuff that you're supposed to do. And because Suni Williams is the highest time person on board, she's now the commander. Nice little feather in your cap, a little consolation prize. Not so bad. She's one smart gal. And they finally get home. Spacecraft came back perfectly fine. Had, the usual minor troubles. You could, with 20/20 hindsight, make great arguments. Oh, they should have sent them back. Yeah. But what happens if it didn't? Think Apollo 1. Think Challenger. Think Columbia. Are you willing to risk the crew on a probably good guess, but so were the other accidents? And NASA said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to err so much on the side of caution. Again, you'll be happy if we ever get anything off again. So anyway, I'm doing almost all right on time. What's the aftermath of all this? Butch and Sonny are going to be up until February. And again, you can imagine the official comments they have are not exactly what they tell their friends and family at home. SpaceX. Instead of launching a 4-person crew for a rotation that they normally do, they only sent up 2, so these guys have a ride home. And since they're already there, the station has got a full complement. So that's not a problem. They've been up there before. They're immediately productive. Again, doing science, doing maintenance, doing all that space station stuff. So anyway, we're just about done. What about Boeing? We could make all kinds of arguments that I don't want to start trash talking because trash talk is not my thing. Boeing has significant problems. And it's not just with Starliner. Their last quarterly announcement, and this is the very first time I've ever discussed corporate finance in a lecture. But just this quarter ended, the analyst call was the other day. It's a $50, $60 billion company-ish, round numbers, annual sales. Just in one quarter, they lost $6.25 billion. Just in a quarter. Their debt levels are breathtaking. We won't talk, please don't talk, about the 737 MAX. tanker problems for aerospace, etc., etc. And of course, all their workers are on strike now. In the last couple of years, Boeing has lost roughly 30 some odd $billion. I mean, they haven't had a profit in years. A large part of those unforced errors. What do you mean you didn't connect the parachutes? What do you mean you didn't test the clocks, etc.? More than likely, and this is what they find out, was cutting corners to save money. Because you can imagine when the CEOs and all the rest start looking at stuff going, we don't have any money. We're losing, everything we contract out and get a contract for, we're losing money. Find ways of saving it. Lots and lots of stuff gets thrown by the wayside. This is unforced errors in a lot of ways. About 30 years ago, NASA tried this. The administrator was sitting there going, this is nuts. We're paying horrible amounts of money for missions to Mars or wherever they were going. I want 3 things out of the next project. Oh, they're always years late. They cost billions more. This was not sustainable. I want the next generation of spacecraft to be 3 things: faster, better, cheaper. We lost 2 Mars missions and a couple other satellites that way. Because the only way you could save money is not spend it on the stuff that you need. And Boeing is learning this right now. They've got a couple years of recovery before they can get back up to the great company that they used to be. And so this is a cautionary tale. We're pretty much done here. How can you do this kind of stuff without putting in the proper investment? We could spend hours, and unfortunately the numbers aren't public, about why SpaceX is so much better, cheaper, faster, etc. than Boeing. There's lots of good arguments. I don't have supporting documentation. I have great gut feelings. But Boeing, on the whole, I went down to Florida a couple weeks ago. Yeah, it was on a 737 MAX. Had no problem. Again, you can bet they fixed their problems. If they have problems, it's not going to be the same old ones. They're going to do okay in the future. But one of the things that's interesting, Boeing has taken a bath on Starliner. It was a $4 billion contract, 4.5. Already they have lost $2 billion on just that one project. And you wonder why the management is saying, save money, save money, save money. Everything you do, we're losing money on. Commercial airlines, they're going to be fine. They just got to get ramped up and get their quality issues squared away. And that's going to take a culture change and more than a couple years to really fully implement. But they're up to it. I want to believe that. Sell your Boeing stock, certainly, but company as a whole will be doing fine eventually.